But also,
Yeah.
the other guy that sent somebody was Murray Richmond's office. Was another guy. They called him Joe Bacala. He was with my cousin George in the Lucchese crime family, and they sent these guys, these lawyers, to help me, to represent me. But it wasn't only just to help me. They just wanted to know if I was going to go and become more than, they didn't know I was an informant yet at that time, but they were sniffing around to see if I did. And I said, no, I got an attorney. Thanks, like that. But that was my cousin George, is the one you're thinking of.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't that close to that part of it. I just
Right.
remember the conversations
It's
we
a long
had with
time ago
Jose.
too. Yeah,
It
it's a
is.
long time ago.
It's well over a decade. So I
Mhm.
believe your trial was in 2010, July of 2010. So
Yes,
yeah.
it was.
So as far as as far as suppression, that was a complete beatdown because those were really the only legitimate charges they had against you were the guns because you were a felon in possession of weapons. So when they lost that part of it, the legs came right out from underneath them, and
That's right.
everything else they were scrambling in court to make anything sound legitimate, and there was nothing. Like you said, with Cooks on the stand, it was like he was a witness for the defense. I remember in his testimony, Jose said to him, "Well, why did you go to the police?" He said, "Well, because I was scared. I was afraid." And then later on in his testimony, Jose asked him something else, and he's like, "I'm not afraid of him." He just kept contradicting. Where do you recall when he tried to plead the fifth? It was halfway through his testimony, and he tried to plead the fifth. Do you
Yeah,
remember that?
exactly. Yes, I do remember that. Yeah, that's
And
good
the
for
whole
reminding me.
courtroom was
Thanks.
like, the whole courtroom started laughing. We were all like, "What? You can't. You're a witness for the prosecution. You can't plead the fifth."
Well, do you remember
And
when I was waiting in the bullpen in the back, and I didn't know anybody could hear me back there? And what was I whistling back then? I don't know if you were in the courtroom then, and the
if I
judge was
only
like,
had a, if I only had a brain
"Yeah,
from the
I was
Wizard of Oz.
here. I am fighting for my life."
I'm,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
and I was whistling in the back, and the whole courtroom was like laughing, right?
yeah, the judge shook her head. She didn't even know what to make of it. She was like, "Oh, I think the jury was still just walking out too. They weren't they hadn't completely cleared the courtroom. They were kind of siphoning into the jury room."
Hmm.
And so, like, the ones on the tail end of it caught that, which was
Yeah.
kind of funny, which is why I
Well,
think she was shaking her head.
didn't she cry during my testimony too? If you remember that, I think you were there for that too. It was my trial, so you
Yeah,
were there.
I heard that from several people. I was
Mhm.
taking notes and they're documenting things, testimonies, so I wasn't really
Oh, okay.
paying attention to what she was doing. Um, but I did know that she was deeply moved. You could see that in her reactions of when she was wrapping up for the day. I recall also when you got the verdict of not guilty, they tried to pursue the second charge on you. They couldn't get it on you,
Conspiracy.
but they got it. They couldn't get it on. And she's like, if you couldn't win this, you're not going to win that. And she
Yes.
told them, like, don't even bother. You guys brought a bullshit into this courtroom. You muddied the water here, and disrespected the system. And I think that bothered her a lot, how disrespectful they were to the system with
And,
that
and,
case.
and you know what else I thought was disrespectful? When they came to shake my hand after I got found not guilty, I didn't want to shake their hand, but Jose looked at me and said, shake their hand like that," and I didn't want to. But he said, "Show yourself to be better," because when I went to go pick up, I had $55,000 they took out of my safe, and I had to go to the FBI building in New York, so they wouldn't even allow Jose to come upstairs. I had to go by myself. So one of the guys over there, he says, "Oh, this isn't over." I says, "Oh yeah, it is." They thought I was going to be scared. I said, "I'm not scared now because you ain't got nothing on me now,"
Yeah.
and even surrounded by them, I wasn't scared. Punks.
Before you got up and testified, honestly,
Mm,
there it was kind of 50-50. When you got
mhm,
on the stand and testified, I remember having a conversation with Jose during a break, and he said, "Should I take him off the stand?" And it was a Friday. And I
mm.
said, "No, keep him on the stand till the end of the day. Let the jury go home and marinate on his testimony, because it's important that they leave with his words in their brain and not, a witness for the defense, or
Yeah.
them, you know, cross.
Well, that's good that you brought that up too, because you want to know something, Jose. Like I guess they tried to probably talk to Mike Cooks about telling him what to say and stuff like that. But when Jose, he never prepped me or prepared me for the trial. All he said was this, Joe. He says, "Look, nobody knows your case better than you." He says, "Just go in there and talk to the jury like you're talking to somebody in your living room, and they're sitting on the couch." I said, "Okay." He said, "Just that's all you have to do." And so, if you remember, I actually turned from the where the people sit. I turned where the jury sits, so my back was almost towards
The
Judge
judge.
Buchwald. Yeah, the judge, yes, and I was facing the jury because I had my clear glasses on at the time because I still wanted to see them. I couldn't see them, and these are prescription too. And so I apologize, but the lights are bright in here. But I wanted them to see my eyes. I wanted them to look into my soul, that I was everything I was telling them was the truth.
Yeah, and I remember also, and they knew when you
Mhm,
were talking to them that everything you were saying was sincere. They
mhm,
felt your pain when you talked about your father. They
mhm.
felt your frustration when you were talking about the FBI and how they handled you. They felt they were right there with you. That's what swayed everything. It wasn't their witnesses. It wasn't our witnesses. It was your testimony that swayed them. That's really what pushed it over the edge. Like I said, it was 50-50 before you got on that stand. But when you get on that standpoint, you know, like Jose said, just sit up there and tell the truth. Tell your
You
backstory.
exactly. You know what really sad though, how the government exposed me. They're supposed to protect me. That I know they offered me and my fiance at that time the witness protection program. I think like 3 different times, but how why would I? She even said, why would he take the antidote from the same people who gave him the poison? Because how do you trust
You
these
put
people
you
anymore?
Yeah, you can't. You couldn't because they weren't gonna let you go. You beat them and they
Hmm.
weren't gonna let you go. So even if you did go into it's that they would have tried to find other ways to get you, you know,
Yeah, to set me up. They were
time
actually
yeah,
trying to set
get you
me up.
tied up.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
exactly.
they Yeah, they don't like to lose, and you beat them, but not only did you beat them, you pummeled them. Your case was the whole thing should have honestly made the law books, because what they did and what they're allowed to do, what they get away with, is so unconstitutional, and it's just so morally and ethically wrong. They're so corrupt. They're so
Well,
corrupt.
they threw me in the box for 15 months. They tried to kill me in there. I wound up getting MRSA staph infection. I almost died. They cut me open 3 different times. If you remember when they sent me out to the judge, ordered me to go to the hospital, but they
Yeah,
tried to circumvent her order just to appease the court and try to get them out of it. They didn't care that my heart was skipping beats and everything like that. They didn't care. I
no, they
I
don't.
I'm
And they were mad.
220. I'm sorry.
They were mad at you.
They
They were
were
mad at
because I.
you because you wouldn't give up Tony Polero because you knew he wasn't guilty. You
That's
knew
right.
it was a BS conversation. In fact, I remember when they were playing the recordings in court of your, you know, taped conversations with him when they made you wear a wire on him, that you two were having two completely different conversations.
That's right.
He was talking about home invasions in Eastchester, and you were
Mhm.
talking about the murder for hire, and saying, you were saying, oh no, that thing, that thing's not, you were talking about the thing, and he was
Mhm.
talking about a whole other thing, and that was so obvious in those tapes.
I know it was sad how they just really tried to they screw it around, or they take pieces of it, but you could see it. Even Ed McDonald, I didn't really care for Ed McDonald that much, and I know he didn't like me either. But you know something, he asked me the questions. They came to see me in the what is it? They have a meeting between co-defendant meetings is what they can have. And they
Mhm.
said, listen, can you do this? Can you say that? I said, listen, Tony, don't worry about it. Tony was scared. Tony was afraid because Tony was facing 10 years like I was. And
Yeah,
so, and I understand why he's scared, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, I said, don't worry, Tony, I'm just going to tell the truth. Don't worry about anything, and he was afraid. And then, Ed McDonald told him to talk to me like that because it's unethical for Ed to ask me, to do these kind of things. But he had a conversation too with my fiance then too, and stuff. But listen, he didn't take the stand I did, and that was a long time on that stand.
Yeah, we had you stay up there for the full day, so that
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it was like I said, it was a Friday. We wanted the jury to go home, to leave that courtroom with your words on their brain, not somebody else's. Not with the cross and them trying to dissect what you said and turn it into something else. Because one of their biggest games, one of the biggest things that they do, is they use semantics, and they use words that are aggressive words that make people think certain things when it's not really what it is. Like when they were talking about the fire in the house, right?
oh,
They were saying somebody's home, where their kids live, where they're raising their family. No, it was an empty house. There was
right.
nothing there. If you recall that was a big thing, but it was about the way that they word things.
But
Saying, "Oh, he was gonna abduct Sam's kid." Yeah, Sam's kid is a grown man.
right,
It's the language that they use to make you look like a villain in order
exactly.
to to paint a picture for the jury that makes them want to convict you.